well, with that, I think we could go to Oliver Mail. Oliver, could you start by giving us your background and then talking about the MOP market?
I've been in the fertilizer industry for over 35 years. I've spent many years in Europe, in Asia, and now I'm back in Europe. For the last 20 years, or let's say until a year ago, I was at the board of Helm, not on the board, but at the board of Helm, heading the fertilizer business of the Helm's fertilizer business worldwide, and was responsible for turning Helm from a trading house into a distribution company, focusing mainly in the US and in Europe, and being in charge of building up for the fertilizer section 3 plants. One ammonia plant, which came on stream 2006, producing approximately 400,000 tons of ammonia in Trinidad. Number 2, a 1.6 million metric ton ammonium or urea ammonium nitrate plant in Trinidad as well. And lastly, an ammonia plant in Topolobampo in Mexico, which is being built at the moment. Until a year ago, I went on my own as a consultant. And what you ladies would like to hear from me is a little bit about the potash market. As Mike already alluded to, there are, let's say, 3 essential nutrients for plant growth. And this is something I'd like to highlight, especially during the COVID-19 era that we're going through, is whether or not we're going through a pandemic or not, we need to eat, apart from buying toilet paper, but we need to eat. And one of these 3 essential nutrients is potash or potassium. The other 2 is phosphates and nitrogen. And as Mike also said, these nutrients are essential, not only for starches, but for vegetables, fruit, tobacco, and also meat. Why meat? Because you need to fertilize pastures. Potassium chloride is also important for industrial products, whether it's low sodium salts, whether it's raw material for rubber, natural rubber, you need to fertilize the rubber trees, palm oil, bioplastics, and of course for the wood industry, for forests. Again, why is it a growth industry? Mike already said we're going to have in 2050 between 9 and 9.5 billion people. With today it's 7.5 billion people, which means people will need to continue to eat. But the second thing is we've also seen in developing countries that the standard of living is increasing. In other words, instead of the Chinese eating 25 years ago a bowl of rice or 3 bowls of rice a day, today they're eating not only starches, but they're eating proteins, vegetables, meats, etc., etc. The third factor is that most of the developing countries are under-fertilizing, not like the US, not like Europe, but most of the countries outside are under-fertilizing. In other words, there is room for improvement. Mike already said that the demand worldwide is 66 million tons with a 2.5 up to 3% annual growth. The actual effective production is 65, 66 million metric tons. In other words, the production equates the consumption. Somebody, let's say from our participants or attendees will say, yeah, but I read somewhere on the internet that there is a capacity, production capacity of 84, 87 million metric tons. You're not totally incorrect reading that, but it's also not correct. It's a bit more, let's say, difficult to understand. Why? Because the mines are running between 74 and 77% of capacity. And why are they doing that? Because there are certain mines which are so old, so deep, and so expensive to run that instead of closing them down, and we'll get into that in a second, they just let it lay. In other words, the capacity is still there. It's still added on to your S&Ds, but it's not actual production capacity. In other words, in order to produce something out of these plants, you need to invest more money, you need to put in machinery, more personnel. Why are they not able to decommission plants? Well, you've got environmental concerns here, you've got laws and regulations from governments, and it's become prohibitively expensive to decommission a plant. So therefore, it's a lot easier just to let it on your balance sheet and just to say, well, I'm not decommissioning it, I'm just letting it run. The next important thing is to understand that in the Tugasque project, you've got to look at the OPEX and the CAPEX. Most plants run at an OPEX which is well above $60 per metric ton. The Tugasque project is running at an OPEX of just a shade over $39 a ton. In other words, approximately 15% are below $60, 60% are below $100 a ton, 10% is above $100, and 15% is, let's say, way above $150 a ton. And this is one of the reasons why we have calculated that approximately 74 to 77% of production capacity, of total capacity, actually finds the market. Who are the consumers? North America. This is the destination market which Helm is going to take the Tugasque project, which is just over 10 million metric tons. South America, 14 million metric tons. China, 16. Asia, 10. And the others are 13. Who are the main producers? Canada, 19.5 million metric tons. And after Tugasque comes on stream, 19.77. In other words, the Tugasque project is a drop in the ocean. Russia with 12, Belarus with 10.6, China with 8, Germany with 3, Israel with 4, and Jordan with 2.2. The balance between the US, Chile, Brazil, Spain. Now, why is the US so special? Well, it's the home market of the Canadians. And therefore, there, the prices are less volatile. And because the US is literally landlocked, you can only come in through California or through Washington, or you can come in through the Gulf, and there's only one entrance to the Gulf, and that is New Orleans. Yes, you can come in to the East Coast, but you've got the Appalachian Mountains, which block, let's say, logistically a product, let's say, to go into where you actually need it, which is the Eastern Corn Belt, the Western Corn Belt, the Northwest Pacific, California, and the Northern Plains. Remember that fertilizers is a logistic game. In other words, most of the product which is being produced in Canada is, let's say, anywhere between Saskatoon going right down to Regina. It's all put on rail and taken, let's say, over the border into the various areas of the US. Yes, in the southern part of the US coming in from New Orleans, you've got the Russians coming in through New Orleans, serving most of the Eastern Corn Belt. Will Helm be going there? I think Jacob and Olivier will be answering that. But you cannot compare a Canadian producer logistically to a Russian producer who's got similar costs to a Canadian producer. He's got to rail it all the way from the Ural Mountains to Kaliningrad. He's got to put it into store, load it onto a vessel. From the vessel, he's got to go all the way to New Orleans or to Brazil or to India or to China, discharge it into a discharging port, reload it onto a truck it or rail it or barge it in the US cases all the way to a domestic store, then load it back onto a truck to the farmer. And this is where the Tugasque project is able to reduce the logistic steps in order to get the highest possible revenue for potential investors. I think that's it, gentlemen. Again, I discussed about the CapEx. Most new plants or mines to put on stream will cost you north of $1,200 to $1,500 per annual ton. Tugasco will cost around $800 to $900 per annual ton. What is very important in this project is the size. It's only 270,000 metric tons. In other words, you're not coming in with such an amount of tonnage where you're going to add too much volume to the market. Normal mine is between 1.5 and 3 million metric tons. We're coming in with 270,000 tons. It's a drop in the ocean. You're not going to put price pressure or volume pressure on the incumbents, and you won't need to elbow your way into the market because you'll be able to go directly to retailer without having a price or volume fight with the wholesalers.
Thank you, Oliver.
Over and out.
Thanks very much.